Allies are continuing to strengthen Ukraine's air defenses. Last week, 20 NATO allies agreed to form an air defense coalition for Ukraine. This will help protect Ukraine's armed forces and cities and save Ukrainian lives. We are now transforming NATO's comprehensive assistance package into a multi-year program of assistance, helping Ukraine to transition from Soviet era to NATO equipment and standards, and make their forces fully interoperable with ours. We also discussed Ukraine's path to NATO membership. Allies agreed that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. We have now provided recommendations on Ukraine's priority reforms, including the fight against corruption, strengthening the rule of law, and supporting human rights and minority rights. Ukraine is closer to NATO than ever before. We will continue to support them on the path to membership, and will continue to support Ukraine's fight for freedom. And with that, I'm ready to take some questions.
We'll start with the New York Times, please, in the fourth row.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary General, could you please be a little more specific on what reforms the Allies asked Ukraine to undertake on its path to NATO membership? Fighting corruption, strengthening rule of law and human rights, these are all things that Allies have demanded for years with mixed success at the very best. Why would Ukraine be able to implement these now when it focuses on fighting a war? And what, if any, timeline was decided on these reforms to be enacted?
I'm actually impressed by Ukraine's commitment to implement reforms to modernize their society in the midst of a full-scale war. And we have seen that they have implemented changes in the legislation. They have made concrete changes, not least in the fight against terrorism. They are in the process of setting up and overhauling the system for defense procurement in close coordination with NATO, and also modernizing their intelligence services. These are just a couple or three examples of how actually Ukraine is changing, adapting, and stepping up, not least in the fight against against corruption, but also in overhauling their system for procurement of defense equipment. This is important for Ukraine because it helps them to be a stronger country fighting Russia as an aggressor, but it also helps them to move closer to NATO membership. And therefore, one of the messages, one of the important topics we addressed at the meeting today was how could NATO allies work even more closely with Ukraine on these reforms, and also how we can use the NATO-Ukraine Council to ensure the full implementation. And we have agreed a work program and substructure under committees under the NATO-Ukraine Council to ensure that we follow up concretely on the reforms and the modernization of the Ukrainian society.
And a timeline, sir? When would these reforms need to be undertaken?
Many of them are already, implemented, and this is an ongoing effort. We have seen concrete steps from the Ukrainian authorities in the fight against corruption. Decisions have been taken, so this is ongoing, and things they are in the process of implementing.
We'll go to Ukrainian media in the second row here, please.
Olga Kirillova, Chasna News Agency, Ukraine. Secretary General, currently Ukrainian pilots are trained in Romania to operate and maintain F-16 fighter jets. Is it possible now to outline the time frame for the actual supply of fighter jets to Ukraine, and what factors or obstacles affect this process at this point? Thank you.
Well, I welcome, of course, the decision by NATO allies, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, to deliver F-16s. I welcome the fact that training of F-16 pilots have already started, and just a few weeks ago, a center for training pilots was established in Romania. I'm not able to give you an exact date, but I hope the delivery can start as soon as possible. The planes are there, but what needs to be done is to train the pilots, and that's ongoing. And the center has been established in Romania, and the United States has also made it clear that NATO allies are allowed to deliver F-16s to Ukraine. Then I think it is important that, of course, F-16s will make a difference. They will strengthen Ukraine's capacity to inflict losses on the Russian invading forces. And F-16s will also help to further strengthen Ukraine's air defenses. At the same time, I think we need to now realize that there is not a silver bullet, not a single system that by itself will change fundamentally the situation on the battlefield. This is a question of many different capabilities working together at the same time that will push the Russians back. We have to be prepared for a long and hard fight. I welcome, of course, the delivery of modern battle tanks, HIMARS, cruise missiles, and advanced air defense systems, and also the delivery of F-16s. But again, there is no silver bullet, there is no single system that fundamentally would change the situation on the battlefield by itself.
We'll take a couple from further up. We'll go to NTB there, please.
Thank you. Bibiana Piene from the Norwegian News Agency. I'd like to change the focus a little bit to Gaza. Mr. General Secretary, yesterday you stated that international humanitarian law must be respected in every context. Lately, several countries, Norway among them, has condemned both Hamas and Israel for breaching of international humanitarian law. In your opinion, is Israel breaching humanitarian law in its fight against Hamas on the Gaza Strip? Thank you.
I have stated again and again that it is important that international law is respected and that civilians are protected, and therefore I also called for a pause in the hostilities, and I welcome the pause that has been agreed, and I also welcome the extension of the pause agreed a couple of days ago, and I also hope that the conditions could be in place to agree a further extension of the pause in the hostilities. Yes, it is important that humanitarian law applies to all conflicts, and that has been and continues to be my message. And we have also seen clear statements from many other allies on this issue.
We'll go next to the Washington Post. Also back here, please.
Thanks very much, Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. General Zaluzhny has talked about the stalemate, and you said that allies all agree that a full NATO membership for Ukraine is not possible in the middle of a war. So I was wondering if you talked today or yesterday about the mechanisms by which Ukraine in a stalemated war might be admitted to NATO and how that would work. And you just mentioned that Russia is mortgaging its future to China. Could you tell us a little more in detail what evidence you have of Russian reliance on Beijing in this war? Thank you.
We see the economic reliance. We see how Russia becomes more and more dependent on China for financing, for commodities, and also for key commodities for their defense industry. And also the fact that Russia is not not able to export energy in the same way they did before to Europe, which was their main and most important market, not least for natural gas. That makes them even more dependent on China. So yes, year by year, Moscow is mortgaging their future to Beijing, and this is one of the examples of how Russia is becoming more and more weak economically as a result of this war. Then I think we need to realize that, yes, we haven't seen significant changes in the front line over the last months, but there is intense fighting going on. And of course, military achievements can be measured in many different ways. It can be measured in square meters. And of course, then what we saw last year was that the Ukrainians were able to liberate enormous or big, significant parts of their territory, pushing back the Russians from roughly 50% of what they occupied at the beginning of the war. So that was a big gain measured in square kilometers or square meters. But there are other ways of also measuring military gains for the Ukrainians. The fact that they have been able to have deep strikes destroying key Russian capabilities, including fighter jets, heavy bombers, helicopters. The fact that they have been able, without actually a real navy, to push back the Russian Black Sea Fleet all the way to Novorossiysk, and thereby also enabling the fact that they now can transport grain on ships out from Odessa and through the Black Sea. That's a huge gain that cannot be measured in square meters, but is measured in destroying Russian capabilities, pushing back the Black Sea Fleet, and enabling them to move grain out of Ukraine on the Black Sea. So the fact that Ukraine continues to inflict heavy losses on Russia is a way, or demonstrates that there's a dynamic war, it's an intense war going on, where the Ukrainians, because of their bravery, their skill, but also, of course, with modern weapons from NATO allies, the Storm Shadows, the cruise missiles from the United Kingdom, advanced air defense systems, and many other types of weapons, are able actually to inflict heavy losses and also then achieve military gains in the fight against the Russian invaders.
We've got time for a couple more. We'll come to Jan Happ in row 4 here, please. Just wait for the microphone, please. Thanks.
I'm Eun-jung Lee from Yonhap News TV, South Korea, and I saw your statement on the military satellite launch of North Korea, and also North Korea and Russia is deepening its military cooperation. Was this issue mentioned during this meeting? Thank you.
So what we have seen, and that also demonstrates the weakness of Russia, is that they are more and more dependent on countries like North Korea and Iran for weapons delivery. North Korea has delivered military support, including ammunition, to Russia. And Russia and North Korea are working more closely together. Then we also saw the launch of the military satellite. This is something we condemn because it's in clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and it also is also part of the nuclear and missile program of North Korea, which is dangerous, irresponsible, and also a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions.
We'll go to ATV in the middle of the 4th row, please.
Thank you. Fjaka Vitako from ATV Kosovo. So what is NATO's message on peace and stability after the incident in Banjska Zvečan, where a Kosovo police officer was killed? And do you see the Association of Serb-majority municipalities as the right step for Kosovo to feel secure from future possible attacks like the other one during September, but also the stability and security in the entire Western Balkans? Thank you.
Also, over the last few months, or the last year, we have seen some serious incidents of violence in Kosovo. I just visited Kosovo. And what we saw this spring was an attack on NATO peacekeepers. 93 NATO soldiers were wounded, some of them life-changing wounds. and that's totally unacceptable. And then we also saw the Banska incident where actually people were killed. And of course, this is serious. This highlights the challenges we face in Kosovo and the importance of all sides to de-escalate, to refrain from actions that can further increase tensions and refrain from any inflammatory rhetoric that can increase tensions. This is my message. This was my message also in my meetings in Pristina and in Belgrade. The message is that Pristina and Belgrade has to engage in good faith in the EU-facilitated dialogue. Kosovo is an example of how NATO and the European Union are working very closely together. EU is in charge of the diplomatic efforts. We are present with thousands of troops on the ground, and actually as a result of this we have added 1,000 more NATO troops to our presence in Kosovo, to roughly 5,000. I believe that the proposal of an association of Serb majority municipalities could be a way forward to try to find a solution and to make progress within the EU-facilitated dialogue. So yes, that's absolutely something that should be looked into.
We have time for one more. We'll go to Buka here in the front, please, in the middle.
Thank you, Slađan Tomić, Buka Magazine, Bosnia. Is NATO going to send more troops to Bosnia? If yes, when? Thank you.
So, NATO has a presence of 5,000 troops in Kosovo. We have a military headquarters in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I visited the headquarters, but there we are working with and supporting the efforts of EUFOR, the EU force. And again, an example of how NATO and the EU are working very closely together. And of course, to a large extent, we also speak about the same nations, EU and NATO allies. I welcome the fact that the EUFOR force, the mandate, the UN mandate for that force was renewed. If that hadn't happened, of course, then we had to consider what NATO should do, but I'm glad that the mandate for this EU force was renewed. We have made it clear that we cannot allow a security vacuum in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that's also the reason why we so strongly supported the renewal of the UN mandate for the EU force, or the EUFOR Althea, and with this support from NATO, we have something called the Berlin Plus arrangements, which allows NATO to help and support with command and control for this force.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, so we had a good discussion on that, and the message from the NATO allies was very clear that we would like to see a ratification finalized as soon as possible. We agreed in Vilnius on the importance of concluding the ratification process for Sweden. Therefore, I welcome that President Erdogan some weeks ago submitted the papers for ratification to the Turkish Parliament, and that the Turkish Parliament, the Foreign Relations Committee, has started their deliberations on that document. The fact that President Erdogan submitted the papers also means that he actually recommended ratification, because that's part of this proposal for the Parliament. And therefore, also in line with what we agreed in Vilnius, I also expect that they will now work with the Parliament to ensure ratification, because the agreement in Vilnius actually had 2 steps. One, to submit the papers for ratification. That has happened. And second, to work with the Parliament to ensure ratification. So we will continue to work on this, and the sooner the better, because it will be good for Sweden, it will be good for NATO, and good for all NATO allies to have Sweden as a full member.
Thank you very much.